Welcome to Wines We Drink, a podcast for wine lovers and learners. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum, and together with my counterpart Keith Herndon, we'll be exploring a new wine each week. Keith is a lover of wine, and I'm a learner of wine, and we hope you'll sip along with us. Hello and welcome everyone. We're thrilled to have you with us during the fourth season of Wines We Drink. I'm Charlotte Norsworthy Varnum and you're joining us for our third episode. And across from me, as always, is my partner in this summer fun project. He's my co-host, Keith Herndon, a certified wine sommelier.
Thank you, Charlotte, and I'll add my welcome to all of our listeners who support us and push us to make the best wine podcast we can. You know, we love our listeners.
Absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be here without your support. Maybe we would. Maybe we would just keep having fun. But anyway, we're recording today in Keith's wine kitchen. We're surrounded by his hundreds, and I mean hundreds, bottles of wine and wine art and framed certifications. You know, this place is certainly a testament to this man's love of wine.
Well, I'm so grateful that my wife is on board with me treating this as my man cave.
Well, I'm sure this is preferred to the traditional man cave. And, you know, she does get some great wine out of the deal.
Yeah. Well, you know, we launched our fourth season 2 weeks ago, and already we're getting some great feedback from our listeners, you know. So we're thrilled that our podcast resonates with so many of you, and we're going to keep trying to come up with great wines, great selections, great stories to tell you as we move through this summer season.
If you've missed our first two episodes this season, you can find them along with all of the other episodes from seasons 1, 2, and 3 on all of the major podcast platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We also have a full episode guide at wineswedrink.com.
So, Charlotte, in last week's episode, we drank a wonderful example of a rosé from southern Spain. That was a wine that certainly put us in the mood for summer, right? I mean, it was a summer rosé. Today, I'm sharing a wine that can only be called bone dry.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And it is a perfect selection to serve cold on the patio on a hot summer day. So we're staying in summer wine mode.
Summer wine mode. I mean, bone dry. I like the sound of that.
Well, before we get too deep in today's wine, I'll explain what I mean by that, right? The basic process of making wine is fermentation. And fermentation is when yeast eats the sugar from the grape juice and converts it into alcohol. Very simple process. Mm-hmm. The amount of sugar left over when the yeast is finished eating is called residual sugar. Right? So in some cases, a winemaker can stop the fermentation process to ensure that they have some sugar left if they want a sweet or a semi-sweet wine. But for a bone-dry wine, right, or a dry wine, the winemaker wants the yeast to consume as much sugar as possible. Right? So according to the folks at Wine Folly, a typical dry wine will have less than 10 grams of residual sugar, which isn't much, right? Okay, so for some French varietals, the residual sugar is required to be at 4 grams or less, right, to be considered dry wines. Mm-hmm. Well, the wine we're drinking today has been fermented to 0 residual sugar.
Wow.
You can't get drier than that. That's why I called it bone dry.
I mean, it's earned it. I mean, I'm so eager to experience what a 0 residual sugar wine tastes like. I guess my hope is it's that it's not going to be too tart for my taste buds. But I guess, I'm eager to get started. What bottle of wine are you opening for us today?
Well, we're opening a 2022 bottle of Gewürztraminer from the Gunlock Bunshoe Winery in Sonoma, California. And that's a
mouthful.
Mouthful, right? This is an old European varietal that is well known in Austria, Germany, and France's Alsace region. But today's wine is from California, produced by a family-owned winery that traces its heritage back to the Rhine Farm vineyard here. The family has been farming this land for 165 years.
Wow.
In fact, this wine is produced from unique clones of vines that were originally planted all the way back in 1858.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of history and science, I guess, in today's wine selection. You know, I do wish the names were a little bit easier to pronounce. Maybe that's just a me problem. Gewürztraminer? Correct me. Is that how I see how you say
Gewürztraminer.
Gewürztraminer. Okay, everyone go and practice in your corners and come back. The Gunlock Bundschuh Winery, that altogether is just quite the tongue twister.
Well, you're not wrong, Charlotte, but I'll let you in on a shortcut, right?
Okay.
The fans of Gunlock Bundschuh Winery, and there are a lot of fans of this winery, they lovingly refer to it as Gun Bun.
Okay. That's an amazing nickname, and I will adopt that henceforth. So, Keith, why don't you go ahead and open today's Gun Bun selection?
Will do. Well, remember last week's wine had a glass stopper, which was an unusual bottle.
So
We're back to a
interesting.
very traditional. So, I just cut the foil and I'm now extracting the cork out of here. So, this is a standard cork wine. So let me pour you a glass of this Gun Bun Gewürztraminer.
It even says dry on the label, so that's how you know, right?
Right, I'll pour my glass now.
As you're pouring, I can see there's a little color to it. It's very pale yellow, maybe even a light gold would probably be a better way to describe it.
Yeah, very, very light gold. Very, very light gold. But I think that most of the wine notes I've seen about this one describes it as a light gold. And that would be typical for this varietal, I think.
Well, its color is kind of crisp in a way that seems to be advertising what's to come, I think. And so I'm going to go in for a first sniff and see if that's true.
Yeah, as you put your nose in the glass, let us know what first comes to mind.
I mean, immediately, there's a lot of floral aromas coming from this wine, but very fresh, bright florals. But what's crazy is the one that I'm getting the strongest sense would probably be roses, which I've never can say I've smelled before in a wine.
Hey, rose petals, you'd think you'd get that from a rosé.
Right.
But this is
But no.
definitely not that,
No,
right?
it's not.
I definitely agree with the rose petal, the floral aroma. I'm also picking up which is the aroma I love about this wine is honeysuckle.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of other flowers in there, jasmine, lavender.
Mm.
It's almost a bouquet.
It is. I mean, and they're really the floral aromas are delightfully surprising. I mean, the lavender, the roses, you kind of think of those as being heavy floral scents, and they really aren't. They're very bright and light and fresh. And I was kind of expecting to be overwhelmed by citrus because when you're thinking dry, you're thinking, I guess maybe tang, but this is much more subtle than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, the citrus fragrance is in there, but I think it's a secondary note,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to call that grapefruit
Okay.
again.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe it's because we really talked about our wine last time as being grapefruit. But maybe I still have that on the brain. But
Right.
But I think that there's some grapefruit there. I think you have to leave your nose in the glass for it to pick that up, though.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right. Also, I'll add the winemaker notes refer to lychee aromas.
Ooh.
And that is considered a hallmark aroma for this varietal. But I admit, I'm no expert in what lychee smell like, right? So I'll just go with the winemaker's notes on that one, right?
Sounds good to
so
me.
so Charlotte, take that first sip and tell us what flavor notes come to mind.
Whoa. This is a dry wine. I mean,
It's very dry. As we said earlier, it's bone dry.
bone dry. I mean, zero residual sugar. The acidity is super bright. It supports, the grapefruit. I feel like definitely the aroma and upon the taste, it's coming through. I got to go in for another though.
Yeah, I for our audience, I say this often. Don't judge a wine on your first sip. You've got to go back in for that second and third and sometimes fourth sip before you get a full sense of what the wine is. You just can't rush to judgment, right?
Yeah. I think you're right because I had no idea what to expect coming into this. You can't judge a book by its cover when it comes to this wine. I will say upon that third and fourth sip, I'm getting apple, but like a tart green apple, like a Granny Smith. And, I do want to add that this wine isn't as overly tart as I was worried it would be from the bone dry description. It's tart, but not, puckering.
Right. It's not sour.
Right.
Right. It's tart. It's got some of that grapefruit But it's got a little bit of that apple, that stone fruit quality that kind of mellows it a little bit, you know. So now again, I want you to have that. Maybe we're already on your fifth sip now. Okay,
Who's counting? Who's counting?
But I want you to concentrate on the wine's finish, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you sensing after you swallow the sip?
I mean, that there's some crispness to the finish, and I would say there's some minerality, some salinity, you know, that really even hints at some spicy notes, maybe some hints of pepper, salt and pepper, if you will.
Well, I don't know about maybe the salt a little bit, right? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's kind of it's pretty extraordinary. It's pretty complex on the finish in a way that's surprising to me. It gives you a lot to think about.
Yeah, I mean, those are some excellent observations. I mean, when I think of Gewürztraminer, you know, the spiciness that you detected there is a common trait for this varietal. But I believe much of this wine's finish is a reflection of its terroir, right? The vineyards here in Sonoma where this wine came from are mostly clay loam soils, but there's significant gravel deposits that contributes to that minerality. The vineyards are on the low southwestern slope of the Mayacamas Mountains, but they're only 8 miles north of the San Pablo Bay, right? Okay. And that salinity that you're detecting there, I think, arrives courtesy of some gentle breezes from the ocean through the bay.
Yeah.
There, right?
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, what you're saying to me is that this bottle of wine is really doing its job. It's kind of transporting me to the Sonoma Coast and requiring that we understand its origin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a combination of location and winemaker skill, but this bottle really delivers. I mean, Wine Enthusiast magazine called it a hidden gem, and I have to say, I love this. Its own winemakers liked it so much that they wrote on their website, quote, "It's a true masterpiece if we do say so ourselves," end quote.
Right? Wow, yeah. I mean, that's how you know it's good, when you have to toot your own horn. I mean, it's unlike anything I've ever tasted, and very unique in its own right. And you said a few things about the vineyard's location that contributes to the wine's excellence, but you also mentioned the winemaker's skill. So what are some of the human elements that maybe went into this wine?
Well, that's a great question, and there are several actions that deserve mentioning here, right? Winemaking is like a chef. I mean, you're really cooking something, right? You're making something from a recipe. So first, there's the decision to let the vine canopies grow full and lush in a way that protects the grapes from the direct sunlight. They also pick the grapes early to take advantage of natural acidity. They work at harvest to select the best grapes from a combination of old 44-year-old vines and some young 10-year-old vines, right? So once they decide on the grape selection, they press the grapes using whole clusters. And that includes the stems, and that stem material is contributing some vegetal quality, and I think that adds a richness and texture to the wine. And then finally, they freeze a small portion of the fruit, which they say is to, quote, develop the mid-palate of the wine, end quote, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I typically associate freezing grapes with ice wine, which is a really sweet wine, but that's not the case in this one, right? Okay, yeah. And I'll add one more thing. The winery has completed its transition to organic farming, and it's officially part of the California Certified Organic Farmers. So there's a lot going on that contributes to this wine's just excellence.
Wow, I mean, this is certainly not a minimalist wine. There's a lot of human intervention, but all for the good, it seems. It's so very carefully crafted. So with so much human touch, does this mean that our listeners are going to have to pay up for a quality like this?
Not at all. That's another beautiful thing about this wine. It's very affordable. Most of our listeners should be able to find this at $25, $30, right? The Vivino app has a national average price listed at $28, which I think is an amazing value for this quality. The tasting panel gave this wine 93 points. Wine Enthusiast gave it 92 points. And the Vivino app gives it 4 out of 5 stars and has it listed among the top 10% of wines in the world.
Wow. I mean, That's another wines we drink selection that rates high on the price quality meter. We need our own stamp, you know?
I guess so, right? So, I think the Gewürztraminer that we drank today is a quintessential expression of what this varietal can offer. A lot of times when I'm drinking wines, I like to refer to Wine Folly's varietal guides, when I'm tasting wines to see how the one I'm drinking compares to maybe what I would refer to as their exemplar description, right? Mm-hmm. So Wine Folly says that this varietal is like the grown-up version of Moscato. It is a very aromatic and intense grape. And so I think today's bottle checks those boxes. That guide goes on to say, quote, the acidity levels range from moderate to low, but the best examples always taste fresh and balanced. So I would say that the acidity in ours is moderate to high, but it's definitely a fresh and balanced wine. So two more checks, against the exemplar description. So overall, I would say this is a wonderful expression of the Gewürztraminer varietal.
Yeah, I would agree, having just tasted the one. I'm eager to hear your suggestions then on how we should pair this wine with food. I'm assuming there's maybe some seafood on tap for a wine like this?
Oh, man, you have assumed correctly,
okay.
Charlotte. The first time I ever had Gunbun's Gewürztraminer was a couple of years ago at a seafood restaurant overlooking the Napa River. It was the year earlier vintage to 2021, and I paired it with a wonderful Chilean sea bass, and it was an exceptional meal, right? The 2022 vintage that we're drinking today was featured at a tasting at Tapped Athens Wine Tasting Market, and it was as good as I had remembered from my California meal. That's when I made the decision to feature it on the podcast. It's a versatile wine when it comes to pairing, right? So I think I like to offer wines that, that our audience can get a lot of versatility from.
Right.
The Gunbun website suggests that it works with such wide-ranging dishes as sushi, charcuterie meats. They even say it'll work with the Thanksgiving turkey.
Wow.
Right? But for me, you've got to pair this with a flaky white fish that has little fat, and you're going to have the perfect pairing.
Oh my gosh. My mouth is watering.
That Chilean sea bass, some tilapia, some flaky white fish, and you're going to be great.
I wish we had a plate of some of that right now.
But I'm going to do you better.
I know.
Right.
Okay, so we'll talk about what I'm assuming will be some cheese, right?
Yes.
I'm here for the cheese.
Always. You're always here for the cheese pairing, right?
That's right.
Well, this wine works really great with Chev. It works with triple cream cheeses. But my personal favorite is Munster. Right?
Yes.
This cheese has been described as tasting like a cross between mozzarella and mild cheddar. It's slightly buttery, and I think it has a little bit of a tasting characteristics that work with the tangy tartness of our wine today.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I just think our wine complements that nicely. So I've got some Munster slices and some crackers there on a plate for you, so please give that a try and have a nice another sip of this wine.
Yeah.
I love Munster cheese.
Oh, man. You're so right. This buttery and slightly nutty Munster is cutting through the tangy tartness, like you said, of the wine. The textures kind of meld and melt together. This just works so well.
Right. The Gewürztraminer varietal is well known in Alsace, as I mentioned earlier, but this region is also the ancestral home of Munster cheese. Right?
Okay.
So no matter where the grapes are grown or the cheese is made, I think heritage works when you're considering the pairing.
That's exactly right. When in doubt, just go for what's local. It's an important tip for our listeners. So do a little bit of homework when pairing wine and cheese. Find those pairings that have some common ground, some common history. Your taste buds are really going to thank you. I know that mine are thanking me right now as I'm tasting this. So, okay, I'm going to have a few more bites of cheese, take a few more sips while we take a break. We'll be back shortly with the show segment that we like to call The Finish. Hello again, everyone. We are back from our break, and now we're in the portion of the show that we call The Finish, We want to bring the show home with some interesting nuggets that will keep us on your mind long after the show has ended.
Well, Charlotte, to that end, I'd like to ask you and our listeners a question.
Uh-oh.
Why do you drink wine?
Oh, well, I guess the answer's maybe too simple for that, but I enjoy it. I like it.
Well, that's a great answer. You enjoy it. I agree with that. But I'll add a qualifier. For me, it's more than simple enjoyment. For me, wine is fun, right? It's fun to explore. It's fun to explore new grapes, new styles, and it's fun to explore food pairings. It's fun to visit wine regions I haven't been to before or to return to my old haunts, right? Wine is fun.
Okay, I agree. Where are you going with this, though?
Well, there are literally thousands of wines I could choose to feature on this show. But today, I wanted to present a wine made by people who understand that wine is fun.
Well, I mean, it's a great start when you're known as Gun Bun. That is fun.
Right, I'll agree with that. And it rhymes, right? Right. I've not met Jeff Bunshu, the president of the winery, in person, but he joined the tap tasting via Zoom, and you could just feel his energy and his presence coming through the television screen. This is a man who has fun growing grapes and making wine, and it carries through to the company. The About page on the winery's website doesn't list the team, it lists a cast of characters.
Oh, man.
Right? There's an orchestrator of happiness listed. And Jim Bunshu, the fifth-generation patriarch of the clan, calls himself the Vicar of Weinberg.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? It's certainly a dedicated group of grape growers and winemakers. They make seriously good wines, but they do it without taking themselves very seriously.
I mean, and that is unique for a wine space. So that is such a wonderful backstory to this winery.
Yeah, I want to leave our listeners with a quote from Jeff that you'll find in his biography on the website. Quote, "Our life here at Bunshu Company, with its wine and good people, has always been about laughter, hard work, enjoying the inspiration that comes from being in such a beautiful place, and sharing what we have with our friends and neighbors." End quote.
Wow, it's always been about laughter. That is so great. And I think that's the message that I'll take away from today's finish. So I guess that's a wrap, right? For today's episode, Keith, where are you taking us next week?
Well, I'm going to be reliving my fun at the Finger Lakes region in upstate New York. I have a wonderful dry Riesling to share with you. It's not quite as bone dry as the bone dry we had today, but it's a dry Riesling, right?
Well, hey, I mean, another dry white wine for the summer sounds like perfection. I'm already excited for our next show. So until then, everyone, cheers.
Yes, cheers, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Wines We Drink. Listen to our other episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wines We Drink, and check out our episode guides at wineswedrink.com. Cheers.